President Trump will head to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania later today to pitch his tax reform plan. The president will speak before nearly 1,000 Pennsylvania workers, including truckers, who he will address specifically, according to a senior White House administration official. The president says Americans are ready for reform. Watch.
People want to see tax cuts. They want to see major reductions in their taxes, and they want to see tax reform, and that's what we're doing. And we'll be adjusting a little bit over the next few weeks to make it even stronger. But I will tell you that it's become very, very popular.
Bringing money back to America from overseas will be a major focus of the speech. An excerpt from the president's speech tonight reads the following. This has been embargoed until just a minute ago. Now we have it for you. We will eliminate the penalty on returning future earnings back to the United States. We will impose a one-time low tax on money currently parked overseas so it can be brought back home to America where it belongs. My Council of Economic Advisors estimates that this change alone would likely give the typical American household a $4,000 pay raise. Kevin Kelly, let's talk about this for a second. This is the first time we are hearing about the details of the plan. We got the embargo details that he's going to unleash later. That one-time tax, do you think that's the key point in moving the needle on economic growth, or is it the corporate tax rate at 20% and that pass-through rate at 25%?
Well, we've always known that this repatriation of capital overseas is a bipartisan issue. We saw it actually in the previous administration's budget. Hillary Clinton had it in her budget. We just didn't get any details about this. What does this one-time low rate mean? Is it 10%? Are they going to tether it to investing here in the United States, right? Do they have to reinvest in property, plant, equipment?
Rather than using that money to buy back stock.
Yeah, exactly. And so when he ties $4,000 to an American paycheck, that's going to be pretty interesting, because does that mean there are going to be contingencies placed on this money coming back? Now, what's also notable is that this will come back. It's in what form? Can they get the Democrats to come back over and work with them on some other things? Because this won't impact the deficit, which tends to be where the Democrats have gotten religion, right? Yeah. And they're going to stake their foot in the ground. So this is actually pretty interesting. I do think this will move the needle. We've started to see some economic data already do very well in this environment. Yeah. Think about the manufacturing data that's coming out, the durable goods. All these leading economic indicators are doing phenomenal. This will just help it further.
In terms of the deficits, you've seen some liberals, some Democrats turning into worrywarts about the national debt and deficits. And I'll point to one thing. The solution to debts and deficit is faster growth. And you get faster growth through tax cuts, both for corporations and for individuals. Yeah. The Wall Street Journal has an editorial today pointing to the Congressional Budget Office report on Friday that the budget deficit for fiscal 2017 grew for the second straight year. The disturbing thing is that spending only grew, I say only, 3% overall for the year, which is relatively tame for the federal government. The national debt doubled during President Obama's time in office. The reason is because the economy wasn't growing fast enough. That's the solution to any budget.
No, they were also spending like sailors. Yeah, They went from $10 to $20 trillion.
Yeah, and that's the issue.
Under Obama.
Sorry.
I love how you like to say sailors and not women at a department store.
Well, that's the biggest problem. Tying tax reform to the budget deficit is a false equivalence, because the problem we have is, where are we spending that money? It's on entitlements, right? Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. We also have the other part that we spend on is the military. And the problem is that if you get tax cuts, you can help pay for those things, right? Because you're going to have growth, and there's going to be higher payroll taxes, and the economy is going to be humming.
But the key to that is if they are going to stick to, budget neutrality, revenue neutrality, and if they do, then that, shrinks their options when it comes to tax reform and tax cuts. And I thought it was interesting that the president did make that distinction between delivering tax cuts and tax reform. Tax reform is a lot harder to do. You were talking about where there is some bipartisan consensus. We are seeing that on reducing the corporate tax rate. But, of course, the question is by how much. Yeah. Democrats want it a little bit higher than Republicans.
The Committee for Responsible Budget, Maya McGinnis's group, continues to say that tax cuts do not pay for themselves. And tax cuts do not necessarily pay for themselves through growth. But we haven't gone down this road. I mean, for the last 8 years, we've been living with a 1.5–2% grower of this economy. Once we get past 3–4%, you are going to see this plan.
We've also seen spending going up.
Right.
So to have taxes pay for themselves, you also have to cut spending so you can balance that budget sheet.
But getting back to Maria's point, we had 1% GDP prints, 2% GDP prints. Guess what happened when deregulation started to take hold? We got a 3% GDP print, and that was just by deregulation.
Exactly.
So to imagine a 4% GDP print based off of fiscal policies and in the form of tax cuts, it's very realistic.
Just really quickly, as the Journal editorial page writes today, if growth reaches 3% for even a few years, the Treasury is going to get a windfall of new revenue far exceeding current estimates. The entitlement reforms are still important to controlling deficits, but without faster growth, there is zero chance.
Yeah, that's a great point. Meanwhile, before the president touts tax reform tonight, he's expected to meet with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at the White House. The two are expected to discuss the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. This following President Trump's decision to slap duties on Canada's Bombardier Airlines and lumber exports. According to Reuters, Trudeau's goal is to persuade the president that Mexico is the biggest hindrance to NAFTA, not Canada. The president joked about the agreement yesterday when he welcomed Pittsburgh Penguins co-owner Ron Burkle to the White House. Listen to this.
He's a great negotiator. Ron, how about negotiating some of our horrible trade deals that they've made over there? Here's what I want. I want to get him. Oh, I would love to have Ron Burkle. And it's great to have you, Ron. But I really mean that. If you want to get involved in negotiating NAFTA, I like it.
So, Amy, the president has threatened to pull out of NAFTA unless changes are coming. But even throughout all of his talk about that, it really was Mexico who he was most worried about, not Canada. What are you expecting from the meeting today?
Right, that's what he was focusing on. And he did campaign, vociferously about rolling back NAFTA because of jobs being shipped to Mexico. And when he talked about keeping jobs in the United States, he was saying we're bringing those factories back from Mexico, not from Canada.
Right.
He didn't point north as being the big drag on the United
Wilbur Ross,
States
when
economy.
he was on with us, I'm sorry, pardon me, when Wilbur Ross has joined us in the past, he also said, really, the Canada part of it wasn't really the one that needed the tweaking.
No, and in fact, we want to have that Keystone pipeline that's coming from Canada through the United States down to the Gulf. So we have a lot of points of cooperation when it comes to trade.
Yeah, one of the issues, though, is that when we're talking about car manufacturing, a lot of it does actually happen up in Canada. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we've had such a great recovery, because car sales have done phenomenally well, especially on SUV side. And a lot of that does happen in Canada, not only Mexico. So in order for NAFTA to be, you can't get rid of NAFTA because it would just halt all economies. We need to revisit, and that's what Wilbur Ross was saying. We need to update it to the 21st century.
I love how the president says NAFTA. NAFTA. I said it wrong, but NAFTA.
My favorite is China.
No. China. That one makes my hair stand on. NAFTA's different.